Thank you. There is a Facebook page posted by a man named John Hannell from Bellingham, Washington, who has the most amazing artists on his Facebook page. And that's where I found Peeta 2 years ago. I think Mr. Cannell is a woodworker, but yeah, you know him. um, She's gonna unmute for a second.
There we
There
go.
you go.
I do not know him, but I know of him. So,
Oh,
yeah,
he
correct, but you're
posts the
correct.
beautiful work by wonderful people, and that's where we've gotten some great ideas for our programs. So Peeta Tinay, pronounced correctly, good, is a basket artist. She lives near San Francisco, and for 10 years she worked at the caning shop in Berkeley, where she learned absolutely everything about weaving and caning by, as she said, deconstructing things and putting it back together. And after doing that for 10 years, she branched into her basketry skills. And she is in galleries. She sells at top-notch shows and sales. And we are delighted to have her with us this morning and tomorrow night to tell us lots of cool things. Thank you, Peeta.
Thank you for having me. So I will go ahead and do my screen share now. Let me pull this up. Here we go. All right, there we go. And let's see. All right. Can you see this all right with what's here?
If you could put it in presenter mode, it's
Oh,
down at the bottom right of your screen.
bottom right. I don't see it here. Let's see. Bottom right, bottom right. Sorry about this.
Sometimes if you do the drop down on slideshow, it also will have a way to make it presenter mode there.
Mhm. Get back to this.
Yeah, so you can click slideshow up at the top bar.
Yeah, just a sec. Let's see. There we go. Okay, slideshow.
And then present from the beginning.
Try it now.
Say not now, not now.
Not now. From beginning.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Thank goodness. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I want to say that with being offered the opportunity of putting together two presentations, a morning and an evening, it really, it's this wonderful opportunity for me to go back through so many images over time, looking at what I've done, because I don't often do that, you know? So it just really kind of was nice to see where things have been and where they're going and kind of getting ideas even from places that I've been, kind of revisiting things. So it's been really, really wonderful. So thank you. And so this here, what you see on the screen, this is the beginning for me. This is where it all started. So what you see here are two child-size rockers. And the one that is to the right of the screen that has the really dark areas that you can see, if I'll use my cursor here so you can see this. So this is all the original weaving that's here. This is the new weaving that's here, as well as this white material that's here. And I'll talk about the materials in a moment. So this little rocker is from the 1920s. And then this one, this poor little thing off to the left, this is probably more from the 1940s, maybe like late 1940s. And I know that because when these came in to me for restoration work, I was able to meet the son of the woman that had owned this. And so it's kind of easier to date when you've got the person dropping it off. Same thing with this rocker. The woman that had me do this one, was the woman that contacted me. So I had a little bit of history to be able to date the pieces. So what you're looking at here in terms of materials, the frames of these are steam bent rattan, and all the rattan pieces here, they're all steam bent and then put onto jigs in order to create these frames, to create these shapes. So both of these have rattan frames. And then the weaving materials are something called round reed, which is here, this white material that's here. And you'll also see how the color, when it ages, it's right here. It's this kind of beigey color. So, and this here, this more cordage looking material, this is called seagrass. So the plant materials, we've got rattan. So it's a vine rattan palm. It grows all over the world. There's many different varieties of vine rattan. Most of what I use comes from Indonesia. So all over Indonesia. Then it comes into China, and there's not that many factories that actually produce the round reed. But that's where it's produced. So that's the plant, and the end product that I use here is the round reed. So the round reed that you see in here, as I was saying, it's this white color. And it comes in many different diameters. It comes in anything from a number 2, which is like a 1.25 millimeter, all the way up to maybe a 12 millimeter diameter round material. They mill it out of the core section. So, and it's naturally this very kind of white or off-white color. So as Jane was saying, I started in 1990 at a shop called the Caning Shop in Berkeley, California, and I was able to be totally immersed in the world of restoration. So we did everything from cane seats, rush seats, both paper fiber, natural rush, splint seats, and then we also did antique basketry repair. And so at that time, there was a business in California that sold antique Japanese ikebana baskets, and those would come in occasionally for repair. And they were just this spectacular pieces to have there in front of you to really investigate how it is that they were made. Those are not made with round reed or rattan. Those are made from bamboo, and they had these incredible wisteria handles. So it was being immersed in that shop and really becoming so intimate with the materials and the projects that I was able to really create the niche of what it is that I love to do, which is the wicker. So okay, so we have a piece here that this really can't be repaired. This is a complete reweave. And so the preceding slides are going to show you guys how some of that works. So let me see, let me find my cursor. It disappeared. There we go. Okay, so that rocker that was on the left had to be stripped down to the frame. So here you can see the rattan. And so this needed epoxy, it needed screws, it needed a lot of stabilizing before any of the weaving could take place. And it was also kind of, what happens with these pieces is they're made with nails, and the nails over time, they will just pull their way out of the rattan. They don't have the ability that a screw does that's threaded, that goes into the meat of the material and holds it. So any repairs that I had to do with that, I went through and added screws. So screws and epoxy to really get this to be as stable as possible before doing any of the weaving. And this right here, you can see on the table, this is a coil of seagrass. Probably some of your members have done basketry, so you may be familiar with that. So seagrass, it's a marsh growing plant from China, and it grows maybe, I think it's like 40 inches tall or so. But it's been a cordage that's been made and used for a very long time, probably with wicker furniture. I'm thinking that they might have used, they started using it like at around 1900, all the way up through probably like the 1930s. That's about the most commonly used era for that material. Okay, so what we've got here that has to happen first is this, right in through here. This is the whole frame is wrapped with the seagrass, with the cordage. And you can see here, so the frame gets wrapped, and then as we come here to one of these support pieces that bonds more of the frame together, so that's where the wrap becomes incorporated here to really bind this frame together. So it's not just the nails, it's not just the screws, but it's this this wrapping with the seagrass that helps to create the strength of the structure. So after the wrapping is done, then you can see through the back here, I've started the weaving. The weaving techniques in this, so it would be wrapped, I guess wrapped and lashed. And the seagrass then does a simple over-under weave. And then the round reed here that you can see these white areas where there's sort of an arrow that appears, that's twining. So it does a simple over-under weave as well as twining in order to create this pattern. What I do with the seagrass, with the cordage, before I start weaving, I don't soak it because that would get it too waterlogged, but I will dip it, and that gives me a little bit more flexibility with it, and more ease with that. Okay, and just to say too, the photos that we're looking at with these two chairs, these were done in, I think, 2011. I was looking back at the time frame with these. So here you can see the back is done, the seat is done, and now I'm onto the arms. And here we go with one of the arms, and then the round reed. So we've got the over-under weaving, and then the white lengths that you see off to the edge of the chair, that's twining. So it's a 3-rod wale. That's creating that edge, and then past that will be a simple border. And here we're looking at the underside, and we see more of that, the wrapping and what really ties down that arm to the frame. And here we are when it's completed. And you can see the new versus the old. So with restoration work, when we have new areas of weaving that they can be toned to blend in with the old materials. So there's kind of different stains that can be used to blend new into old. But with something like this, you know, it's an opportunity to just let it age on its own. And it also could be something that we could also do the stain to that as well to bring it to kind of a more warmer tone. Okay, I put these in here because I wanted you to see this. This is a chair from the 1920s, and it's actually woven out of a twisted paper. So when you think of the paper fiber rush, you may have seen it on like paper bag handles or sometimes made using this same material. So this seat has been rewoven. And right here, this corner on this arm, this is always like a high stress point that ends up getting broken on a piece of wicker furniture because it's that edge that gets like jammed into a wall, or you're picking up to move it from one room to another and it's getting knocked into the door jamb. So in order to do these corners, it's kind of a intense situation, but these corners on both this chair and those small rockers were done in the same way. And so you can see it here once it's completed. And so the round material, round on round, doesn't want to sit very nicely. So as I'm creating this corner, I'm using a tack hammer to flatten the material so everything lays nice and flat, the way that kind of plates and creates that nice corner there. And the paper, just like other natural materials, gets very brittle with time. So it's kind of, you can take this old paper and it sort of disintegrates as you're working with it. So you have to be pretty careful. This, when this was completed, or like a paper fiber rush seat that would be woven out of the same material, we always shellac them. So we'll do a number of layers shellac. What that does is it helps to penetrate the paper and really make it a little bit more like stain resistant from, oils in your hands or anything, any food that drops into it. That's sort of one of the nice things. And just a historical piece about the paper. It was created, I think, a little prior to World War I, and it was an alternative because we couldn't get the materials here, the natural materials for producing wicker furniture in the United States. So they started making these pieces right a little prior to World War I, and then it became really a predominant material that they were manufacturing wicker furniture out of for quite a while because of not being able to get the materials from overseas. Okay, so this is a video here. This is kind of the ultimate reweave job. Probably the ultimate reweave job that I've ever done. I've done 2 sets of these. So in 1959, the Fiat company, the car company, created a car called the Fiat Jolly. The Fiat Jolly was the owner of the company's opportunity to make a small car that he could actually drive onto his yacht, and it became an island hopper. So there's not that many of these cars that were produced and still exist. And they had originally the front woven seats, and then the back bench seat is also hand woven. So this has, I'm going to play this and I'll talk a little bit over it as it's going. So this is the frame. Again, we had the round reed. So all of those spokes, or I guess you'd say your warp, is set up first. And so I'm twining. So I'm starting at the very top of the bench to create this. More twining. There's a couple of rows of this. Again, we have those corners here that I was talking about earlier that get that get damaged easily. And so now I'm on to the over-under weaving. And I'm creating little lap joints that add to the durability of the weave. And it's a steel frame that the owner had all the frames powder coated before they were brought to me, which was nice, not to have a rusty frame. And that piece of wood is holding the warp down. And this is the last little bit. Those sides were challenging. And here, the blowtorch is getting rid of all the hairs off of the reed. So it gives me a nice smooth surface to be able to do a little bit of sanding, make it nice and smooth before I do any of the finish work with a stain, something to protect it. And I used like a polyurethane stain on these. And here's the car. Really cute. I got to ride in it. This one lives in Napa. So cute. So there we go. So that's like the ultimate, I'm trying to find my cursor here. That is the ultimate reweave job that I have ever done. And I've done 2 sets of those. Boy, they were a challenge, and they were like a really wonderful opportunity to do something so challenging and have a really great end result. So I guess what I'd say, oh, I want to get out of that. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about suppliers, but I also want to say that after this, I'm going to get away from the restoration. So if anybody has a question, I guess you could put it in the chat now.
Yeah, Jane had a question, which was a lot of our parents had wicker furniture, and that we see a lot in the thrift shops and all sorts of disarray. How do you tell if something is worth restoring?
That's a good question. Um, I would say, well, I think we get into the notion of like there's the sentimental piece of that, like if you have something that's been in your family, there's that piece that makes it worth getting restored. Then the other part of that is how brittle is the whole thing? Like if you get in there and find that you can do like a spot repair and the rest of it is still holding up well, um, it's worth repairing. It also depends on kind of the use, like how much are you really going to use it? You know, like if it's something that you like the look of that you want to repair so it's not falling apart in your house, then it's worth doing. Um, the other part too is that if I think one of the main things is if you put your hands on the arms and you go to move it, if the whole thing is moving and grooving, it means that the whole frame might just be sort of held together by the weave. It might mean that all those nails have rusted through and there's not much that's holding it together. So it would be kind of a good thought to walk away from it if it's something in a, secondhand store. That would probably indicate there's either broken dowels underneath the weaving or all those nails are broken and it wouldn't hold up to use unless it was fully restored by what I showed you in that first thing with the frame, tearing it down and epoxy and screws. So helpful?
Definitely.
Okay.
And then the other question is, or it's not really a question, it's just asking to use the cursor more to point out what you're talking about.
Yes. Okay. I keep kind of losing it out of my sight. So I'm like, where is it? Yes, I will do that.
And
So,
that's all we have right now.
I want to talk about I listed just 2 suppliers on here. There's a lot of different suppliers that are wonderful. I listed Royal Wood because they have an incredible extensive selection of weaving materials, as well as books and kits. They sell dyed round reed. They sell the basketry dyes. And then another supplier who's a direct importer is Intermaris in New York. They're just really nice to deal with. They're second generation family owned business. So those are here. I also want to put a plug in for where I worked for many years in Berkeley, California. The caning shop also has they have a website, and they do pretty brisk mail order business as well. So Jim Whitus is the owner, and he's written many books on like gourd crafting. So as well as the Caner's Handbook, which was one of the first books to hit the market that had caning and wicker restoration. So
And I put all of those links in the chat.
great. And these are my tools. I wanted to give you kind of a setup just to show you what it is that I use. Very simple hand tools. So I've got my favorite, the Japanese side cutters, which are here. I love these. This is a packing tool that's here. I've got a variety of awls, an old ice pick, a bodkin, and a much shorter awl. This is a wonderful tool. This comes from Royal Wood. My flathead screwdriver that I use as a packing tool. This glue is wonderful. It helps me to do things and really hold things in place. It's very strong. So I think if any of the restorers had access to this 100 years ago, they would have been all about this glue. They would have loved it. So this is one of my favorite knives. It's a quick open. It's great. My Felcos. I also really am a strong believer in protecting your tools and having the leather sheath. Royalwood sells these. And then the clamps, the little 2-inch clamps that are here are awesome. I have probably 300 of them. I use them all the time. So, tools. Okay. So this piece dates from probably I didn't write down the date, but I think this is around 2014. So this is some of my earlier work. This is what I call a 4-inset handle basket. It's twined, as well as this section here that's done. It's a herringbone weave that's worked in both diagonals. And the materials here are binder cane, both on the inside of the basket and on the outside. In the middle is sandwiched flat reed, which you can see kind of has this orange. You just get a little hint of it. It depends on the angle at which you're looking with when you see the color and when you don't. So what we have are number 6 round reed, and we have the flat reed, which is in here in the orange, sandwiched in between, and we have the binder cane on the outside. I have a few more views of this. So here we have the inside. So when this herringbone weave is created, we're doing 2 separate diagonals. And you can see here, I've got a piece of the binder cane and 2 pieces of flat reed, and then the other piece of the binder cane. So they're all sandwiched together. So the reason that I started doing that is that also the scale of this basket, this is 16¼ inches tall by a 29 3/4 inch diameter. So they're large, a very large basket. So when you get into large work, you not only need to increase the diameter of the reeds that you're using for strength, but also with doing this this herringbone weave, if I were to have just used one piece of flat reed, it would have really it would have been measly for what this really requires at this large scale. I lost my cursor again. There it is. So all of this has been dyed. I use a cellulose fiber dye. The dye that I use is no longer available on the website. It's from Jacquard Products. It's called Basic Dye. But I can get this. They have a $250 minimum with ordering this now. But any cellulose fiber dye would work on these materials that you see here. Yeah. So let's go ahead a little bit. So this is looking down inside that basket. What's here, this is called a split spoke base. So it's a split spoke base, constructed base here. And then this is all twining that you see throughout here in the base, twining here up through the sides, transitioning to the herringbone pattern here, back to more twining here. And then up here at the border, it's a rolled border, and it's worked both. There's the 2 pieces. You can kind of see they flank each other here within the handle. One works to the inside to create a border, and the other one works to the outside. So what ends up happening is you get this nice, big, elegant, and just big, beefy border. So I love doing those. So there's that. And I wanted to show you what this looks like as it's in process. So you can see both diagonals here. We've got here. These are the lower going to the right, and these are the uppers coming to the left. So I have to work back and forth with those. And as you can see, I'm peeking underneath, and it's easy to, well, not easy, but a mistake can be made easily because you can't really see what you're doing. You're only looking at the top pieces. So you have to get underneath it and really kind of check your work before you go on. Make sure that everything is correct. And then here it is looking down. Oh, sorry. Let's go here. So looking down on that herringbone weave and what it looks like from the top down. So you can see one set of diagonals are coming in, the other set of diagonals are coming out. So with the cellulose fiber dyes, something that I learned early on is that they are quite fugitive with fading. So you need to use like a UV archival varnish. I use a product by Golden's that I love, but Krylon makes one. So any kind of a varnish that has UV protection properties are really important to use on this. Otherwise, you will get the fading. So this piece here has, again, it has the herringbone weave working in two different diagonals, yet it's a little different in that the diagonal going to the right here is coming over two of the spokes, and this red one is only coming over one. So it changes the way the pattern looks. And also when you alternate color, it really makes the pattern look different too. And here's a zoom. I want to talk a little bit about this right here, where you see this kind of variegated from this black into this gray color. So that's done with a technique, space dyeing. So it's where you make a coil around your hand with also this material here that makes this is flat reed. It's a 1/4 inch flat reed. So small coils are made, and you line them up on a dowel and you drop them into a bin with your dye, and you dye one end and then you turn it over. Once you've got your color you want, you take them off the dowel, drop them over the other side, dip them in. So you can kind of keep an eye on how deep the color is going. Also making sure that the colors that you're using together don't create something too muddy where they merge. So that's something that I've done too. I bet your members are probably familiar with something like that. I bet it is. So lidded work. This also has that space dye technique with that orange and the purple, and it has the same type of herringbone pattern as the previous piece, where it's coming over two to the right, and then the second set of diagonals are only coming over one. And here we're looking down on the inside. And lids are their own, it's like the Three Little Bears, with it not too tight, not too loose. You have to, at least for me, I have to do a lot of finagling to get it to be just right. So something that I've discovered with time is that by putting this, and I have another picture coming up that shows it a little bit more, but this right there is a strip of leather that I've cut. So by applying that, and I use a wax linen, by applying this, it protects both the weaving here on the collar of this lid that's underneath this strip of leather, and right here, the border of the basket. So when it's taken off, put back on, it's not going to get all scuffed up, or at least it will scuff a whole lot less. And it's sort of a nice finishing technique too. And then here you can see it a little bit more. The leather is right here. And this piece was made, I think, 2018. So, yeah, so to get back to that a little bit, I want to talk and just say that since I had all this restoration and reweave under my belt, when I started making my large scale basket work, it was in 2008, and I started with making large pieces out the gate because I already had all this skill and history and understanding of materials. So I like to make large scale things, and that's when when I started doing my own work, that's where I started. So okay. So we're going back in time a little bit, but this was kind of an amazing experience. In 2005, I was standing in the Tacoma, Washington, that's where I used to live, in the Tacoma, Washington post office at my P.O. box. A 212 area code showed up on my phone, which I knew was New York. And I got a call from the assistant to a woman named Cynthia Raleigh, who's a fashion designer. And they were looking for someone to make woven wicker pieces for their 2006 spring runway show. So I made almost 30 pieces for them. So this is a hair piece, and this is made out of round reed that you see here. All the rings are made out of round reed. All the lashing that's done here that holds everything together, I've used cane. The piece that comes through here is a piece of bamboo. And unfortunately, old computer, old technology, this is the only photo that I have left. It's a tragic thing. I was looking and looking. I thought I had an external hard drive that had everything, but I don't. But it was an amazing experience. So they were hair pieces, they were yokes for dresses, they were shoulder pieces, pieces for shoes. It was kind of a really amazing experience. I had a kind of a short window of time to make these pieces. Um, I think I had like a month to make all of them. They sent me CAD drawings, and I had to let go of the design that they sent, but I stayed within their parameters of size and shape, and I was able to achieve what it was that they wanted. And I went online and I pulled this from the internet. It's one of the dresses that came down the runway. So you can see there's a yoke piece here. Um, and I went to the runway show and it was kind of amazing. Um, yeah, it was quite something. And then there were these huge doors in the back that opened up. They were closed before the runway show started. So these were closed, and I kept looking at these and I thought, oh my God, they took the work that I had made, put it on a scanner, blown it up huge, and created these doors. So it was that moment of like, wow, everyone's looking at my work in this huge scale with these doors. They have no idea. It's this woman from Tacoma, Washington that has made all this stuff. So, okay, and I tried to blow this up. It's super blurry, but you get the idea. So I have another project coming up that's going to show you how I made the rings. Um, and I have this here. So you can kind of see it. I have something black I can put behind it. So this was one of the sample pieces that I made. So you can see it a little bit here. So this was a sample piece for one of the hair pieces. So it was extremely creative, something I never envisioned myself doing. So, okay. So then, coming to 2018, I decided I was going to take that same technique and build a large hanging light. So this is round reed. And what I used to create these scrolls, I have a little hand plane. So it was a matter of planing down to get this nice long tapers. So I was able to work these over a jig, and you'll see that in coming up in some photos. So working them over a jig, letting them dry, and then hand forming the pieces. And what you're looking at here too, you can see this white area on the top. That's sanding through to the natural reed. So it gives us that nice two-tone, and it really shows off some of the detail with the scroll. Okay, so here it is in process. So this is about a 30-inch diameter. The whole piece that I'm making here, and this attaches to the bottom of an acrylic diffuser. And here's some more of that. So once I get the scroll work done, here's my work area. So you can see here, this is where I was wrapping the scrolls around these. Here, these become little jigs, so I can do a lot of hand forming. Here's all the shavings in this bin from the hand plane. And you can see the little, the clamps in action, indispensable, as well as rubber bands to hold everything in place while I'm working. Here are some of the scrolls on the jig. Very simple. So here we get into those rings. So the rings are all made. I got a picture of those coming up. Here's more. Okay, in here you can see I have them kind of sorted with, well, a little bit sorted with the sizes. And they're lashed on. onto the scroll. So all that lashing is going to give this a lot more stability too. And here in this bag, you can see, so what I've done is I've taken a piece of round reed, different sizes of dowels, and I've wound the round reed over the dowel, clamped it in place. So essentially we've got the spring, right? So then I know what I can do is I can take that spring and I can do a nice little angled cut. You can kind of see it inside the bag here. So that angled cut, I'd make another angled cut here, and then I'd bond those two together with the glue. So I'd make a series, many rings, in order to make this. So you can see here's some of the progress. Here it is when it's completed. Not the greatest photo. I have a better photo coming up. Here's a little detail. So it shows you how the wrapping and lashing here. So filling in, kind of, designing it along the way, figuring out like, okay, what kind of negative space do I want to leave? What works? And here it is from the underside. So this was a show that I did in San Francisco in 2019. So you're looking up. So this is that I was talking about, that acrylic diffuser that's right behind it. And I attached this scroll work. I got some magnets and I glued them to the back side of this decorative piece. And then I just dropped magnets on the inside. So that's how this applies here. Very easy. And now we're going to talk about the sides of the shade. So this is a zigzag weave that's here. So I've used flat reed, and it's all been dyed black with the cellulose fiber dye. And again, it's knowing that we need to beef this this weaving up. So we've got a layer of 4. So not only do we have a layer of 4 to beef this up, but we also have these ends that create this beautiful pattern when all is said and done. So it all has to, it begins and it ends, but it also creates a pattern. So here it is when it's completed. So you can see also, so the ends, but then by doing the sanding, it gives us these highlights. It highlights, it just makes the weave pattern pop all the more, what it brings out. And I lost my cursor. There it is. Okay. So there's another detail. And here it is hanging. I hung it over near me. There was a show of a bunch of different artists in Petaluma in California. And so it was this great warehouse space. And here I am next to it kind of for scale. So it's a very large drum shade. So I ordered this, I custom ordered the size. And the ceiling might have been a little low for display, but it worked. So there we go. And then here it is. So this was the American Crafts Council show in San Francisco. And this was 2019. So 2019, you can see some of the shapes in here. I haven't yet transitioned into kind of more of what I'm doing now. But there's the light, right? So I was able to hang that with a piece of rolled steel. Yeah, so these here, this and this, they're both tables with glass. We have the 4-inch handle, like the one we were looking at earlier. Something that has the roped handles here. So you can see that I do like to make large scale. Okay, and before I go on, did anybody have any questions?
Yep, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
So you've been saying that it's large scale. What is the like size of these baskets?
Okay, for example, this one here, this is overall diameter, probably a 32-inch diameter, like this very exterior, and about 16 inches in height. So this would be, I was thinking about something that could sit either as like like a coffee table or in between 2 armchairs, kind of a nice generous size. So this one is a little bit smaller in diameter. This one, I have one behind me there, that's similar in size, and it's probably more like a maybe 29-inch diameter or so. So all of these are in that range. This here, this is the next project I have coming up in these slides, and I want to talk about this. This is a 42-inch diameter, so this is quite large right here. This one was a 38. This one is probably, I can't quite remember. I think it's around maybe might be 40 as well, like a 40-inch diameter, 42-inch diameter. This one also is deep from the wall. This was about a 12-inch depth. Was there anything else?
I also had a question of, do you do anything smaller to test how your different weaving structures and colors are going to work, or do you just go for the full thing?
I go for the full thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of the smallest diameter would be something like this. And these are around like a 22-inch diameter. That's about this one and this one and this one. So yeah, that's about as small as I make. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I like making large scale. I think it offers me the opportunity to do more. Like when you have this larger scale, there's more that I can do with it. So yeah.
And then Rachel asked, do you use the baskets, or are they just for display and selling them?
Right. I would say these here are something that when I have people that purchase these, they'll use them in a living room. I'm just using that as example. A lot of people, they'll fall in love with it and they'll say, "Oh, I'm going to use that in my living room. It's gorgeous. I can put throws in it, anything soft," right? So they're usable. I think the main thing is that reed will dent, if you put something in it that it could scratch or dent. So I always tell people, absolutely, they're usable. Just be wise with what it is that you're actually putting in it. These pieces here I've made specifically for the wall, for art. And then the tables here absolutely are meant to be used. So, and then these are ottoman trays. These are meant to be used. These have a leather base. Yeah. And then this is smaller than everything else in the booth. I had used this here as an example for a basketry workshop that I was going to be teaching. So I had some information right above it about the workshop.
And then
And
the
there,
last question from
yeah.
Rachel is, do you ever dye your pieces after you weave them?
I go back through. That's a very good question. So when I was showing the sanding on on the light where it was white in color, so that's the natural reed coming through. So I do that at the very end. I will Everything that I make gets sanded and then re-dyed, like by like a brush. I get back in there and I'll hand tint. So I'll make more of a diluted version. Let's say it's a brown. So I want to have that be kind of like that two-tone, right? I want highlights and lowlights. So I'm going to come back through and dilute my cellulose fiber dyes. I'm going to do an application of that before the UV varnish. So yeah, absolutely. I do come back through, and it's the hand dyeing though. It's in the finishing. So I'm never going back through. I wouldn't weave something with natural reed and then submerge the whole thing and dye it, but it's in the finishing process where it's absolutely re-dyed.
Cool.
Any
Those are
other?
all the questions right now.
Okay. Okay. So how are we on time, by the way? Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay. So uh let me back up really quick here. So this piece on the wall, I have some really great photos I'm going to show you of how this is constructed. So right here in this middle part, this grid is what's coming up next. So this is a basket base. So what I've done, all these lengths of round reed here have been split in half. These pieces feed through. I'm using these dowels as spacers. These are rubber bands on the ends, so I can drop them in. And so this holds this space for this grid. So here's more of a top-down view so you can see where this is going. So what happens here with the grid, I drop the dowels out one by one and I come back through and I lash. So I'm using cane, that's the brown that's here, and I'm lashing each one of these sections to bond the reeds back together. So they're holding place. Um, and then this here, this white weaving that you see that's been cut away in each corner, that's the preliminary weaving. So when I have these dowels, I come back through and I weave around. So you can see that's the weaving that ends up getting cut away. But what that preliminary weaving does is it holds the whole base together. It holds the grid while I go back through and I drop a dowel and I lash, and then I pull another one out and I lash. So I come down the line. So I'll come down this line, I'll lash here, and then I'll come over here and I'll come back up this way. And then I'll come back down here and I'll lash and come back up. So once all this is completed and held in place, then I'm going to cut this weaving out of the way and discard it. And then I have the permanent weaving that I do. So this is twined. This is 3-rod wale that's through here. This is using, I think this was a number 2 round reed, so a fine diameter. And then I transition to a larger diameter up here. I go with this more kind of tealy blue. So it's going to go back and forth between these two colors within the base. Here it is looking down. So if you look here, getting back to the question about kind of dying as I go. So you can see here, if we look at these spokes, these are a solid color. If you look closely here at this blue, you can see it's kind of a two-tone. We've got the lighter on the top surface and the darker in the more recessed areas. And it's really apparent here with the brown, right? So that's where I've gone through and I've sanded this whole top area. And I've gone back through with the dyes, the diluted version, color that I'm satisfied with. And I've applied it. So it gives the weaving a lot more depth by doing that. So sanding, and when I sand, I use a vacuum. So I'll sand a section and I'm vacuuming and I'll use I use these. So I may vacuum and then dust away a little bit. And the key with this, it's about removing color. It's not about removing material, because when you're dealing with small diameter round reed, you can get it to be no longer round, where it becomes quite flat if you're a little overzealous with your sanding. So you need to be careful. And here, so the whole base has been woven, and now I'm coming back through and I'm doing this fancy kind of overlay work. So this was this fancy overlay work you're going to find in American wicker furniture from the Victorian era that was made late 1890s through like 1900, had all this fancy kind of lacy stuff. So it was fussy, but it was worth it. It made this nice detail on the inside. Um, so again, we're dealing with different diameters of round reed, dyed with the cellulose fiber dyes, and just slow as you go here with this, with the 3 pieces that just loop through the twining. And then they'll join here. So there we have that. And just another image showing you kind of how it goes. So I'm getting in there too. The tool that I get in here with as I'm working to make space, I want to be very careful, but I'm using my ice pick, kind of the slender, long ice pick. I'm using that to open up and then feed the piece. And also something from the restoration world. Knowing that I can take this piece of round reed that I'm feeding and I shave it down. I take my knife and I shave it and I get a long, slender, tapered point, because that is something that I can feed through this area. I couldn't do it just with like a cut, like an angled cut end. I need to have that little skinny piece that I can pull through. And here it is completed. So this was about a 38-inch diameter base. So all of the finishing is done to this base before I add in the side spokes and create the rest of the weaving, because I found out early on I can't get in there as effectively once the whole piece is completed to do the sanding, to do the re-dyeing, and to do the varnishing. So if I have all of this completed, it's really, it just helps everything else go much more smoothly. Okay, so here I'm adding in what we call the side spokes. So these are base spokes, and these are all what came from that grid right in the very middle. These are the side spokes here that I'm adding, which are much smaller diameter. So you're going to see what these do when they come up. So here it is. Once all those side spokes are added in, it's on its side, and I always want to be really careful. This has a lot of weight to it because this is damp. So I don't want to leave it here too long because it's going to kind of crush this side. So I quickly took the photo, and then we're on to the weaving here. So I want to start creating this base weaving for the side. And so here, the side weaving is complete. And I weave individual rows. That's what these white ends that you see here. So this is 3-rod wale twining. And so I also want to make sure, even though you're not really going to see these by the time I'm all done with this, I want to make sure that these all land in a consistent way, because I'll see it, and even though these get touched up, I want to know that they're all in this nice pattern here. Okay, so here it is. It's at the same point in time where all the side weaving is done, but it's before I start the ring border. So I've tucked everything to the inside to get everything kind of out of the way so that I can start this. So this is the first step of creating this ring border. Here's a better close up here. So what I'm doing is I'm using, there's 8 pieces. I think I've got 8, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm using the 8 pieces. They're individual, but I'm treating them as one. So it's keeping them all nice and flat together as they're creating this border. Just a little challenging. Okay, so the border is completed. You can see it a little bit here. This is a ring border. And now what it's transitioning to is a lattice. And this lattice is getting worked back over that weaving that's underneath. So we also know that by creating this, so those side spokes have to come up the side underneath this weaving. They come up to the top. They create this intricate ring border here. Then those pieces come and they create this first part of this lattice. So that means I need a tremendous amount of length. It's a lot to have to deal with, right? So the first one of these that I made, I blew it. Well, I didn't blow it, but I knew that if I were to take this lattice and work it all the way to the underside of the basket here, I was going to need so much more length that was unwieldy, right? So I decided, okay, I'm going to end this here. I'm going to end this lattice work here. It's all going to go to the inside, be nice and tidy. And then I added more pieces on to create the additional part of the lattice that's going to feed down to the underside. There it is from the underside. So you can see the way these pieces come down and they go through the foot of the basket here. And they are all trimmed, and they all, because of the way the lattice works, they cross each other like this as they're right in through here. So they're all cut, and then I touch up all the ends with the dye, and then I use the glue. The glue, you wouldn't have to use it, but I think it is the best practice, because anyone that goes to pick this piece up with time, if they were to grab any of this, it could potentially pull out, even though they're pretty tight in through here. Okay, so here I am. I'm holding it up so you can see the scale. I was telling you it's that 42-inch diameter. So you can see me with the piece and just sort of what the scale looks like as I've got it. And you can also see here where I've done the sanding. You can see these light areas here and the darker areas here. This is before any of the varnish has happened. The varnish you can see has happened in here. So you can see the way the varnish, it, um, it, it changes the color. It makes it much more rich. So, best rule of thumb that I can say is that when you're working with round reed, dyed round reed, the color that it is when it's wet or damp is the color you're going to end up with once you've done the UV protection coats, either sprayed coats or I do a lot of brushed coats. Sometimes I do sprayed coats. I'm going to talk about that a bit more tomorrow. And here's the piece completed. So you can see a little bit from the side. You can see that the ring border here. You can see it transitioning to the lattice and then the additional pieces I added here that create the back part of that lattice. And there's a little detail. And okay, so here it is up here on the wall. And I wanted to show you this. This went to, oopsie, sorry, let me go back. This went to the gallery, the first really nice gallery that had my work. It was called Culture Object in New York City, owned by Damon Crane, and he closed in August. And he closed because his lease was up. He also knew that he was really kind of outgrowing the space, and the area of New York that he was in was really challenging for him. A majority of his clientele are designers, so he would kind of be a little bit more on the outskirts and not as convenient for them to bring clients to. So we're going to see with time what the next phase for him will be, which will be really interesting. So anyway, I wanted to show you what this looks like in situ here with some of the other fabulous things that he had. And then this, I'm going to talk about more tomorrow night because this is really where my work is headed. So it's become much more sculptural, much more kind of that art object, you know. I mean, this is not anything. I mean, you could certainly put things in it. I don't make anything that wouldn't withstand being used for any reason, but I consider these to be art and sculptural. What you're looking at here is it's about 18 inches high, and let me see, did I write this one down? Yeah, so it's 18 inches tall by 16.5 inches wide and 15.5 inches deep. So the construction method for this is it's all twined, with the exception of these pieces here, these overlay pieces. So, yeah, and I have a photo here of it looking down on the inside. So you can see all the ends that are in here. They all create this beautiful pattern. Again, it starts with a very simple base. It's that split spoke base construction. The base that was woven for this was about an 8-inch diameter because I know that that's going to increase about 2 to 2.5 inches on either side. So a 4-inch total increase from 8 to 12. So, but I have photos of this for tomorrow night of this in process. And that is my presentation for this morning.
We had a couple more questions. The
Yeah.
first one is, about how many hours do you think it takes you to complete a piece?
Well, if I think that this one is not a good example of how long, because it was that thing like I wasn't exactly sure of how it was going to go. I didn't have to rip anything out, but I can say my guess. Okay, so here's the very beginning. So you have to prepare all the materials. So I have to go through all the reed and find all the really stiff pieces for the areas where I need stiff. the softer, more supple pieces. So I have to do material selection. Then I have to do the dyeing. Then there's the weaving, and then there's the finishing. And then there's the kind of design time. So I would say if we were to look at this as far as how long this took, my guess is going to be probably about a month, maybe a month and a couple of weeks or so. So when I was talking about those UV archival um, varnishes for the fading, this one has a combination of both the brushed coats of the varnish as well as spray. I need to do the spray in through these areas because I can't reach in here with a brush. So I'm doing a combination of application of finish. Something like this one, if we go back to this probably took a couple of months to make. Um, and the reason why this has all that detail stuff on the inside that took, you know, takes what it takes. You guys all know that, how that goes. So, yeah, probably I would say on something like this, a couple months, um, or so.
And
Yeah.
then Kathy and Rachel were both wondering, how do you care for your hands and your body when doing these giant pieces?
Oh my God, that's the best question ever. I love that. Um, I do, I do a lot of stretching. Right now I've got something going on with the tendon in my hand, in my right hand. I can't quite stretch it open as much. You can see my left is like, oh, that's all well and fine. This one is like, and this happened from something that I was doing that was really tough material. So I would say I stretch. And I also try and get out of like the whole hand. I'll use like my arm and my upper body to hold things in place. So I'm trying to use more of my whole upper torso when I'm maneuvering things instead of keeping it all within like thumb joint and wrist. Um, because I know that this with time, I don't know, maybe 10 years more of being able to do this large scale stuff and this detail stuff. Hopefully, maybe longer, but I'm just guessing. Um, and I'm basing that on other weavers and what I see with older weavers and how their bodies are holding up. But I think it really depends on how much you're not just in the small joints using more of your whole arm, your whole shoulder, your whole like core. So, yeah, stretching.
Um, Jane asked, if she were a millionaire, how much does one of your big, beautiful pieces cost?
This one on the wall is around 10,000. Probably 10 to 12, I'm gonna say. Yeah, I sold a large piece that I don't think I sold for enough money. It was far more complex than this.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I didn't have to pay a gallery commission fee, so I felt all right about the price. But yeah, and that's the challenge. Like, how on earth do you price your work? Like, I'm in a category that's really a a small category of basket makers making large, detailed things. So figuring out how do you price it, especially if it's going into a gallery, because I know that that gallery's it's going to be a 50-50 split. So, yeah.
And then Penny asked, are cellulose fiber dyes the same as fiber reactive dyes?
I do not believe so, but I'm not, I bet somebody else that's part of your group here would know. So when I use the cellulose fiber dyes, the dyes that I use, they're just a one, just a single, they're the powder. I don't have to do any additives. There's no soda ash. And they're very brilliant. They're easy to use. But the downside is that they will fade unless you use the UV varnishes. So, but you can use, I would say if you're interested in working with round reed, you can try almost anything. I would say stay, and it might be the fiber reactive dyes that use the soda ash. I find that for me, when I did try it, it was detrimental to the reed. It made the reed brittle for the length of time that it needs to be in. So.
And then Kathy asks, what was your inspiration to leave the caning world and begin with the artistry?
That's a good question. And I had a discovery about who I am and where I come from. And it was a monumental discovery of DNA. And that happened in 2008. And I was shocked for a long time, for about a year. And we also were in that economic horribleness of 2008. So those two things combined, it really hit me over the head. Like I just felt it like you just got to keep making, just make. And so I did. I just kept going and it just kind of poured out of me. That may sound kind of woo-woo, but that's what happened.
And then my personal question is, I have a bunch of baskets sitting around my house. What's the best way to care for them so they live for as long as possible?
Right. So I would say proceed with caution because you don't know what the materials are that they're made out of. Probably, you might. You'd shared with me that your grandmother was the basket maker.
Yeah.
So if you can find out what the materials are, it will allow you to know how best to maintain them. Um, I, well, with my work, I can say I tell my clientele, okay, get in there with an air compressor. You can blow the dust out. Also, using this brush, getting in here with a brush and do some very light dusting. That's all people need to do with my work. I don't want them to get in there with a wet cloth. I don't want them to get in there with a Swiffer because the Swiffer has all those little fibers that are going to catch on ends like a paper towel would, they're going to leave that. So I would say dusting is going to be your best option. A soft bristle brush, stick with that. Don't use a cloth. I would be very hesitant to say anything about water without seeing them. So I would dust them and I would also keep them out of the sun. I think that's a really good rule of thumb for anything that even with my work that has these UV archival varnishes that are preventing this color from fading because the sun, it dries everything out. It's going to make them dry and brittle. The same thing with like a chair cane seat. You don't want to keep that in the sun. You don't want to have that over a heater vent. Those are all things that I learned early on with doing the restoration shop where I worked in Berkeley. So yeah. And there's, if anyone has antique baskets, just proceed with caution. Do a little dusting, maybe try and find something that looks a little bit like it online and do a little research and see what it is that you have. So, yeah. Anything else?
Those are all the questions I have. So yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome.
This was amazing. You are an excellent teacher, Peeta.
Oh,
You explain things beautifully and your work is just stunning.
thank you. Well, I was trying to make it as clear as I could. I know there was a
Yeah.
lot of terminology I could have gotten into, but I didn't want to make it confusing. So I hope it was clear.
It was very clear and very perfect. And I'm excited to see tomorrow night. Maria Elena just said, I'm in New Hampshire and found a giant wicker basket in an antique store. Not sure how old it was, but it was round, about 5 feet across, 1.5 feet high. Any idea what it might have been used for?
I have no idea, but you know what? I'm always open to people emailing me pictures and I can take a look at it. And if I have any thoughts, I can share what I think it might be or maybe someone that I can refer. I always like that because I know a lot of people that I can, if I don't know what it is, I can say, I think you should talk to this person. I think they might be able to better help you. So she's welcome to email me directly.
And is your email address on your website?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
just
I just
Peeta
put your
at-
website in the chat again for
Cool.
anyone who wants to look at it.
Very good. And there's more restoration pictures on my website that are kind of interesting to take a look at too. So. Yeah.
Well, everybody, what do we do to clap? We do this on
Ah,
Zoom.
well, I'm going to give you one of these back too.
Yeah. Kathy, any comments before we wind up?
Well, yeah, I want to thank Peter. That was amazing. And I hope it inspires people to come tomorrow evening and see her next talk. And I was glad, Peter, that you mentioned at the beginning that you liked doing 2 different presentations, because that's something we've been thinking about is, are we asking too much of people to do 2 presentations, or should we just have them repeat one